Good morning. I wanted to share some thoughts. I was basically just up here walking in the woods talking to myself anyway, so I figured might as well record it. But I was just thinking about evolution, how we got here, consciousness. I want to start off by saying, I've been looking into the science of, things like evolution, how we got here, creation, apologetics for a long time. I used to attend atheist meetups in Milwaukee, mostly trying to kind of evangelize in a non-threatening kind of way. It was great. At the time, I was kind of like their token Christian. It was such a cool group of people there it was the Mythicist Milwaukee in Milwaukee, obviously. Anyway, I've been trying to look into and even try to find common ground with, people and try to understand how we got here. But I've got to say, Darwinian evolution has never seemed right to me. There's so much complexity and so much creative design work, it looks like to me, that the idea that this is all just random. Now, obviously, they say it's not just random. They say the mutations are random, but the selection criteria is not random. So it's not exactly random, right? It's saying that there's these random mutations to the DNA, and basically nature selects which ones stick around through the process of living. So the idea is that the generator is randomness, and the selection criteria is not random. But it never felt to me intuitively like this randomness-led form of evolution would be sufficient to give us. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff where you need multiple proteins, each of which are, huge lengths of DNA. You need multiple proteins for like for an eye, for light activation. It's one protein that activates when it sees light, but you got to have another protein to basically reset the eye sensor so it can be triggered again. And without both those proteins, the thing doesn't work. So how do you get this kind of thing with randomness? It doesn't make sense to me. Never has. And some years ago, I had this kind of intuition. I'm not going to be just talking about my own thoughts today, by the way. I'm going to back it up with some harder evidence here in a minute. But I'm just saying, I had this weird intuition where I was thinking, if people looked at humanity, like, say, now versus, 200 years ago, let's say an alien species or something, I think they would say that we've evolved. Obviously, there's caveats. Some people would say we've devolved, but technologically, we have certainly evolved. And, I think I was at work or something, and I was like, we're actively evolving right now. We're in evolution right now. Right now. Every day when you go to your job, you're not randomly doing that, right? And so this kind of intuition I had was, I think we're inside of evolution. We can observe it firsthand. We are in the process of evolving ourselves. Now, of course, we seem to be evolving via external tool creation. That seems to be humanity's current vector of evolution. But I wondered, is it possible that all of these same creative problem-solving skills that humanity is currently putting into making tools and technology, is it possible that that creative energy is actually at the heart of the evolutionary process? And I mean, you see all the plethora of life. You see jellyfish and platypus and humans and cats and all this wild creativity just pouring out of everything, it seems like. And you look at the cells and there's all this stuff going on there, and the more you look, the more there is to see. It's fractal. So anyway, okay, so I think it's possible that instead of doing external tools, for a long time, evolution has happened internal to the body. Okay, so I want to talk about, there's the scientist who I think has been achieving the most amazing results of any scientist I've seen anytime recently. I would say he's got some of the most interesting work since, like, Einstein. His name is Michael Levin. He runs a lab at Tufts University, and he is a developmental biologist. And he basically studies how bodies are built. So how you go from a single cell organism to a multicellular organism. And what he has, so he's done some crazy experiments. For example, there's these little worms called Pantera, something like that. It's some kind of worm. You can basically cut them into like up to 200 pieces, and each one will grow a whole new body. Which is wild. Regenerative capabilities. But anyway, Michael Levin and his lab have been working on communicating with cells using things like calcium ion channels and gap junctions, and somehow mirroring, like, he's kind of like been listening to the language that's spoken between cells. And this is one of the big kind of discoveries, is that yes, cells do communicate. But he was able to get these worms to grow two heads instead of one. And I guess their reproductive organs are in the middle of their body. So the weird thing is they could actually reproduce still. And the weird thing was, the babies had two heads as well, but they did not change the DNA, which is very strange. That's very, very strange. And their children's children had two heads, and on, but they didn't change the DNA. And so there almost seemed to be this, almost like an electromagnetic pattern that these creatures are trying to achieve. Okay, so some crazy results and stuff like that. But what he has shown, what Michael Levin has shown, is that cells communicate with each other. And by the way, one interesting thing he's made note of is cancer is essentially cells that have stopped communicating with their neighbors. That's what cancer is. It's very interesting. So he's also discovered that cells are intelligent. All right. So, and what he has he's kind of talked about, Michael Levin's kind of talked about how can we know if something is intelligent? Well, it's not enough to say there's a lot of complex behavior here. ChatGPT, for example, has lots of complex behavior, and cellular automata, like Conway's Game of Life, have a lot of complexity. And you might look at them and say, oh, that looks intelligent, but it's actually just blind execution of rules. And that's basically the thing is, the scientific consensus has basically been something like everything comes from mindless execution of rules. It's all mindless. This is This is the mentality of scientific materialism, and these are some of the ideas that I can never quite get behind with like Darwinian evolution. The idea that, like the blind watchmaker. There's no mind. It's just random. It's just blind execution of rules leads to all the creativity and plethora of life that we see on this planet. That just doesn't jive with me. And so anyway, okay, so how do you know if something's intelligent? It's not just complex behavior. So Michael Levins made the point that you have to observe it, and you have to actually see it if you can get it. You've got to actually give it challenges. So, for example, they've done stuff where they'll put obstacles, like different cells, for example, will migrate to different places. And they put obstacles in their way, and they've actually found that these cells have had, maze-solving capabilities. They can respond. They have a goal, and they can act in novel ways to meet their goal. That's one of the hallmarks of intelligence. So it's interesting. These cells are little intelligent beings. They are with problem-solving capabilities. They have consciousness. They have desires that they are trying to fulfill. So what I think this is kind of getting to is there's, it's like you got Darwinian evolution, complete blind execution of rules, mindlessness, on one side. And then, you've had some believers and theists who have said that, no, actually it's intelligent design. So they believe, or it's intelligent design, or, maybe even theistic evolution. But what I think Michael Levin's work has been showing is that evolution is itself actually an intelligent process. So it's almost something in the middle between what the Darwinian evolutionists and the intelligent design people have been saying. It seems like the truth is maybe somewhere in the middle, where so Michael Levin likes to say, we are all collective intelligences. So if and when you think about us, our bodies are made of billions of cells, human and bacterial and fungal, and we're basically these walking metropolises. And if each cell is actually intelligent and conscious, then it's literally true that we are each collective intelligences in and of ourselves. Okay, so I think that this view of evolution is much more defensible and much more reasonable. And the idea is it's mind-driven evolution. It's not mindless. It's not just random. There is actually intentional, conscious, intelligent effort going into the creation of different organisms. By themselves, within themselves, the cells in their body are trying to solve how to live. And they are working together, both with cells in their own bodies, and they're also working together with their environment and coming to solutions that let them stay alive. All right, that's kind of wild. Also, I guess another question you might ask is, okay, if intelligence, so, a lot of scientists have believed that basically consciousness is something unique to humans. Obviously, that's not, everyone believes that, but there's an idea that you can't have consciousness without the brain, and that consciousness somehow emerged once the brain, kind of magically developed to a sufficient extent. And so Michael Levin's work basically goes against that. And he says, look, each cell is intelligent. You don't need brains to have intelligence or consciousness. So how far, what do you need to have consciousness is kind of the next question. And so I want to jump over to another scientist. Her name is Annika Harris. And she is actually Sam Harris's wife. And so she's kind of come out recently through a series of podcasts and a book and stuff like that, and again, audio thing, that she's been leaning toward this wild idea that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe. And it's interesting, I was listening to this interview she was doing, and she was saying, she's been kind of leaning in this direction for some years, but she's had friends tell her, don't say this stuff publicly. You will lose all scientific credibility if you say this stuff publicly. And she said that was just 5 years ago. And in this interview I was listening to her with, and I'll link to some of these interviews in the comments, in the comments or in the description of the video. But she says just 5 years ago, she wouldn't have been comfortable coming out of the closet, so to speak, and saying that she believed that consciousness was a fundamental aspect of the universe. But she said the scientific community, the landscape has been changing, and it shifted so much that now she's willing to come out and say this. And okay, so what does it mean that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe? It's basically saying it's the opposite of, so there's kind of this thing in the study of consciousness called the hard problem of consciousness, which is there is simply absolutely no explanation for how these mindless interactions of particles and rules lead to the emergence of a conscious experience. So the scientific idea has been for a while that that's exactly what happened, that, random mutations, development of brain led to the emergence of consciousness, which was not there before. So what Annika Harris has been saying, and many others have been saying this as well, so it's not just her, there's, like I said, there's been a shift in the scientific landscape in the recent years, where, and I think a lot of it is the study of consciousness itself that's leading to this. But anyway, the idea that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe is basically a way of saying the universe has always had mind. There's always been a mind. Always. It's fundamental. It's not something that emerges from mindless interactions of dead, dumb particles. There's always been a mind. That's like saying God exists. Pretty close, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the Christian view of God or whatever. But that, that's pretty much what that means. And so I think this is extremely exciting. I think that my hope is that there can be something of a peaceful meeting between theism and atheism, between the hard sciences and religions and beliefs in God and stuff like that. And I think that the study of consciousness is one of the, may very well be the catalyst that causes this to happen more. Um, and this seems a lot more reasonable. I mean, it's pretty wild, I will say, to believe that consciousness has always existed, and even like the panpsychism idea, that the idea that cells are intelligent, maybe even protons and electrons are intelligent, or at least we should say conscious. But I mean, I've been in many scientific, in many of my science classes. In many of my science classes, I remember the teacher describing things as, electrons want to get their full valence their full outer shell of valence electrons filled. Protons want to be with electrons. Positive and negative magnetic poles want to be together. Kind of like men and women. There's just a consciousness and a desire. And it may be that this whole world is made of consciousness, is made of mind, is made of intelligence, is made of desire. And I think this is a much more compelling and beautiful and interesting view of the world than the idea that it's all cold, dead, blind particles randomly colliding.